Tehran erupted in celebration as Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps put its newest attack drone on public display, a moment that will be scrutinized across capitals from Washington to Jerusalem. Crowds surged through Halab Square, waving flags and chanting support for the Islamic Republic, while military vehicles rolled past, carrying the weapon that Tehran is now presenting as a symbol of new strategic reach. The drones on parade were identified as members of the Arash family, one-way so-called loitering munitions built for precision strikes at long range. Displayed alongside ordinary military hardware, they were greeted by cheers and a palpable surge of national pride. For Iranian commanders, the unveiling was both a public show of force and a message. These are weapons meant to change calculations and to deter enemies who contemplate attack. Tehran's military has made clear that the Arash line is intended as a long-range, single-use strike system. Its predecessor, the Arash 2, was presented last month as capable of reaching targets well beyond the borders of Iran. Tehran has claimed that Arash 2 models were used in a coordinated strike on Ben Gurion International Airport on March 21st, an act that heightened tensions and marked a clear escalation in the conflict that has convulsed the region. Military analysts watching the footage of the parade noted the resemblance of the new Arash models to the much-publicized Shahed 136, a low-cost GPS-guided munition that has been used widely for saturation attacks. Like the Shahed, the Arash series is described as having a low radar and thermal signature and the endurance to undertake deep strikes when launched from mobile platforms. The technical specifications that have circulated in reporting paint the Arash family as formidable within its category. The Arash 2 was described by officials as able to carry a warhead in the range of roughly 150 to 260 kilograms, with a claimed range around 200. 0 kilometers, enough, in Iranian hands to reach key targets across the eastern Mediterranean from launch points inside Iran. Tehran has also emphasized the drone's low radar cross-section and its suitability for massed coordinated launches designed to overwhelm defensive systems. In short, these are weapons built for attrition and reach, relatively cheap to produce, hard to track, and intended to impose costs and uncertainty on adversaries. On the ground in Tehran, the spectacle was political theater and strategic signaling rolled into one. As the trucks carrying the drones moved through Halab Square, the mood among many in the crowd was celebratory, a public testament to a regime that sought to show steadfastness and strength amid the pressures of war. For the commanders in attendance, the display offered an opportunity to stress deterrence, an Iranian posture that any strike on Iranian soil would invite a response whose scale and character they could not predict. The rhetoric that accompanied the unveiling was explicit and pointed. Shahram Irani, the commander of Iran's Navy, added his voice to the chorus of warnings. He said, in remarks aired publicly, "Soon they will definitely see a weapon from us that they are very afraid of. I hope they don't have a stroke." His taunt was part bravado, part theater. Language meant to unsettle adversaries, as well as to reassure domestic audiences that Iran could impose costs in return for attacks. The commander's broader point was clear. Tehran intends to sustain and escalate a posture of strategic deterrence if it perceives that its vital interests are under threat. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps itself issued a stern message in the wake of the parade, and in recent statements, any new attack by the United States or Israel will be met with retaliation that the IRGC said will go beyond the enemy's expectations. In one passage, the IRGC declared, "Any further aggression from the enemy camp and the ill wishes of this land will undoubtedly be met with a response beyond the enemy's expectations at a level of strategic deterrence." The force also underscored that it is prepared for various scenarios, including ground operations, and stated their facilities had been prepared to detain potential aggressors. That language reflected a readiness narrative meant to broaden the sense of deterrence beyond simple missile exchanges, suggesting the IRGC envisions multi-domain options to impose penalties. Those warnings did not arrive in a vacuum. Tehran has moved in recent weeks to assert control over the maritime approaches that form the gateway to a substantial portion of the world's oil trade. Iranian authorities announced restrictions on passage through the Strait of Hormuz, saying coordinated transit would be allowed for all ships except those linked to the United States, Israel, and affiliated entities. The IRGC framed those measures as necessary précautions. petitions and as leverage, a way of signaling that Iran can influence global shipping lanes and thus exert pressure far beyond its borders, the Central Military Command, operating under the banner of Qatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, issued its own warning on April 25th. It described continued naval piracy, blockade and banditry by American forces in the region as behavior that would be met with a decisive response. Iran remains committed to closely monitoring enemy movements while maintaining full control over the Strait of Hormuz. The statement read, adding, "We are ready and determined to inflict even more severe losses on American-Israeli aggressors. In the event of any new violation, for Western capitals and regional partners, the combination of public drone displays, recent strike claims, and maritime pressure has altered the threat calculus. A long-range munition that is relatively inexpensive and difficult to detect presents a particular challenge. Air defenses can be neat, worked and potent against traditional aircraft and missiles. They are much less effective against waves of small, low-signature loitering munitions launched in quick succession from dispersed mobile systems. The architecture that once deterred state rivals can, at scale, be saturated. At the same time, the Iranian leadership has continued to signal a willingness to engage diplomatically, at least publicly. Iranian officials have been reported to participate in mediated discussions, including talks facilitated by Pakistan. According to statements relayed through Tehran, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with Pakistani mediators and described Iran's position on ending the war, though he remained unsure whether the United States was truly serious about diplomacy. The comment highlighted a persistent tension. On the one hand, Iran's forces are publicly expanding. On the one hand, Iran's forces are publicly expanding and demonstrating their military reach. On the other, Iranian leaders appear to be leaving room for negotiations if they perceive the intent on the other side to be genuine. In Washington, that eye for leverage and timing manifested in a decision by the president to cancel a planned trip by American officials to Islamabad for talks on the Iran conflict. President Donald Trump addressed reporters and explained the cancellation in frank terms. He said, "You probably heard that we cancelled the trip. We have all the cards. We're not going to spend 15 hours in airplanes all the time going back and forth to be giving a document that was not good enough. And so we'll deal by telephone and they can call us anytime they want. Again, we have all the cards." They have no military left practically. They have no leaders left. We don't know who the leaders are. Nobody knows who the leaders are. I don't think they know who the leaders are, very importantly. So you saw that. And any other questions? What have you heard from Pakistan? The Iran foreign minister was in Pakistan yesterday night. When pressed about tea, practicalities of representation. The president referenced the specific American officials who had been slated to travel, saying the trip would have included Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and criticizing the prospect of lengthy travel for meetings he implied would not be fruitful. He added, "I think Pakistan is terrific. I think the Field Marshal is fantastic. I think the Prime Minister of Pakistan's great, and you know they'd like to see something happen. But we're not going to be traveling 15, 16 hours to have a meeting with people that nobody ever heard of." Concern about logistics and the optics of who sits at a negotiating table underpin the White House posture. "We're just not going to do it. Too much traveling takes too long. Too expensive. I'm a very cost-conscious person," the president said. That blunt American response has two immediate consequences. First, it underlines a willingness in Washington to leverage diplomatic channels on one terms the president deems satisfactory. Second, it leaves a gap that regional mediators, notably Pakistan and others in the Gulf and in Europe, now feel an obligation to fill. For Tehran, the calculus is delicate. The government must maintain a posture of strength that reassures domestic audiences and deters aggression, while preserving avenues to de-escalate if it can secure acceptable guarantees or concessions. Beyond the capitals, the tactical implications of the Arash family's public debut are already being debated. Military analysts point to the convergence of several trends: the proliferation of low-cost, loitering munitions, improvements in guidance and navigation systems, and the ease with which such systems can be launched from mobile, dispersed platforms. When combined, those characteristics favor asymmetric strategies that punish high-value targets without the need for expensive, complex platforms. The low production cost of these systems means that attrition strategy launching repeated waves until defenses are exhausted, become economically feasible. That dynamic has reshaped recent conflict and will likely influence force planning for any country that perceives itself in Tehran sights. To be sure, the limitations of any weapon system are real. One-way attack drones cannot be recalled once launched. Their precision, while notable, is not infallible, and their effectiveness still depends on intelligence, target selection, and the capacity to coordinate strikes in time and space. But when used to impose costs, to disrupt logistics, to threaten critical infrastructure, such systems are potent. The psychological effect, the constant hum of a threat that may come from the sky at limited cost to the attacker, is itself a form of strategic pressure. What lies ahead is a contest of narratives and capabilities. Tehran wants its public display to serve as a deterrent badge, a way of saying to adversaries and domestic audiences alike that it can strike deep and that it will respond if attacked. Washington and its partners, watching the parade and the rhetoric, must decide whether to fortify defenses, to press for tighter regional diplomacy, or to lean on sanctions and other instruments of pressure. Israel and other regional actors, facing the potential for new kinds of attacks, are re-evaluating their defensive postures and considering how to limit Tehran's ability to project power at scale. For ordinary people across the region and for global markets, the stakes are practical and immediate. Disruptions to shipping in the Strait of Hormuz ripple through energy markets and supply chains. Threats to airports and fuel depots complicate civilian travel and commerce. The very public display in Engleb Square was a reminder that the battlefield of the future is not only physical, but also political and economic. The weapons paraded for domestic audiences have consequences that extend into international airspace, ports and markets. The coming weeks will show whether the parade was principally a domestic rallying cry or the curtain raiser to a broader campaign of precision strikes and maritime pressure. Tehran's statements about preparedness and deterrence will be judged against action, whether the IRGC and Khatam al-Anbar follow through with escalatory measures or whether measured diplomacy finds purchase. Washington's response, balancing deterrence, diplomacy and alliance management, will be watched closely, and regional mediators, including Pakistan, will be tested on their ability to coax the parties back from the brink. For now, the image is indelible. Drones mounted on trucks rolling through Engleb Square beneath a sky full of flags and chants. A capital displaying a new instrument of power, a military declaring readiness, a president cancelling a trip and talking tough, and mediators trying to bridge a widening gap. The weapons are on display, and so too are the choices about de-escalation, AP, about deterrence, and about the pathways out of a conflict that has already reshaped the region. In the end, whether these demonstrations of force lead to a chilling deterrence or to a deeper spiral of violence will depend on the decisions taken in the days ahead by the leaders who now publicly trade warnings and defiance.